Okay, so I am going to give you some information so you can fill out that orange sheet that I handed out in class about the elements of drama, and we're going to go through the first 2 pages. And I am in your textbook, chapter 22, page 1247. Okay, so the first thing that is discussed about plays and reading plays is that plays are a staged art, which really just means that they are performed. Plays aren't really meant to be read. They're meant to be acted out, performed, and then the audience watches instead of having an audience who's reading it. Now, that doesn't mean it's totally separate. It's a totally separate experience, but just know that it's not really meant to just be read, as is fiction. But there are some similarities to fiction, and I'm just going to put my microphone down here a second so I can type. Okay, so some of the similarities to fiction, you'll find these on page 1247. The first one is that it has a narrative dimension, which means that it tells a story. And that makes sense if you think about plays that you've seen. They're a story. They're telling you about people and their lives and the trouble that people can get into in their lives. Another similarity is that it has dialogue. And actually, plays are entirely made up of dialogue. It's entirely characters interacting with each other. So the characters talk to each other. And you have that in stories as well. And then the third similarity between drama and fiction is that there's lots of description. It might be different types of description. In fiction, we'll get, a lot of description from the narrator or from a character about what they see, what they hear, and all of that. In plays, you get that in stage directions. So there'll be little directions that tell you, if there's supposed to be sound, what the backdrop should look like, all of those types of things. If there should be a phone ringing or any of that, it gives you those cues. All right. Now, of course, it is different from fiction as well. And the main difference is that there is no narrator in drama. Your book calls it no authorial presence, okay, which just means you don't have a narrator telling the story. Once in a while you'll find a play that does have a narrator, maybe for part of it, but for the most part you're watching it being acted out on stage and the characters are the only ones doing any talking. You may not have ever thought about it, but poetry and drama do have some things in common as well. And this is also on page 1247. The first similarity is that they're sometimes written in verse. Shakespeare was a person who wrote almost everything, all of his plays, in unrhymed iambic pentameter. So he used the conventions of poetry to write his play. More modern playwrights don't do that, but before the printing press and all that, a lot of times plays were written in verse. Second similarity, when you read a poem or when you watch a play, it's almost like you're overhearing, like you're eavesdropping or spying on the speaker, on the characters, like you're a little mouse in the corner. I'll put that in here, mouse in the corner. So you feel like you're watching people, you're reading their diary, like when you read a poem. It feels intimate and like you're watching people's lives. And then the third way that poetry can be similar to drama is that poetry also has dramatic elements. Do you remember the poem My Last Duchess? You had, the dialogue, the Duke was talking to the visitor, and he was very dramatic. And we find out that he had his wife killed and all of that. And so poems will have characters in them, and poems will have people and behaving and interacting with other people sometimes. Okay. All right, then we're going to jump down. It talks on page 1247 down at the bottom that plays may be vehicles of persuasion. What does that mean? Drama can be persuasive. Unlike poetry, where feelings are the most important, and unlike in fiction, the story seems to kind of take the forefront and the conflict that the main character is experiencing. But in drama, actually, ideas are the most important element. And what do I mean by ideas? The issues that are being raised by the play. So the idea that the playwright is tackling the major theme and their take on it is really the most important part of the play. So if you think about movies that you've seen, what kind of message is it trying to send? That's what's the most important. So just know that before you read any plays, that a lot of times playwrights make comments on social events, social issues, belief systems, and they do that through their plays. All right, so when you are watching a play, you want to be aware of the performance elements. And these are discussed on page 1248. So if you want to turn to that page, I have about five bullets that you're going to fill in. All right, so first of all, one of the elements that you'll want to pay attention to would be the voice of the characters. That's going to provide information to you. So how do they sound? What's their tone of voice? All those things we talked about in poetry with the speaker's voice, you'll actually get to hear it. You won't have to kind of imagine what it sounds like. You'll get to hear it through the actors acting it out. Secondly, you'll pay attention to, well, with the voices, actually add to that, what are they saying? So you get to hear what they say, and then you get to hear how they say it. So you get the tone, the emphasis, etc. Okay. So not only do you get to hear the words, but you get to hear how they say it. Third, you get to picture how characters look. So instead of just imagining again when you are reading a story, when you watch a play, you get to see the characters. You get to, see their faces, what they're wearing, all of that, which is really adds to the experience. Fourth, you get to see where the characters are located on stage and in relation to the other characters. When you're reading a story, you kind of have to, again, imagine that. But when you watch a play, they do it for you. So you can just enjoy and take in what they're saying and watch the interaction. And then the fifth performance element is that movement and gestures. So do they cross the room? Do they wag their finger? Do they hang their head? That all helps you understand the emotional tone that the playwright is going for. Okay. So it's great to have those performance elements. It just adds another layer to drama that you don't get in fiction. And it's why I've had you watch videos of the short stories, even if they weren't true representations, but just to get a feel for, how might what I'm reading play out in real life if I could see it. All right, if you want to turn your orange sheet over to the back, this talks about the representational quality of drama. What does that mean? Well, drama is mimetic, and if it sounds like imitate, that's because that's what mimetic means. It's a mimetic art. It mimics real life. So drama it's kind of a reflection of the human experience. We get to watch humans interacting with each other. Okay? Another representational quality is that it's active, meaning the actors move on stage, they speak, they react to each other. And they have to do that for anything to happen. So that's, without it, there's no play. If people didn't get on stage and act and talk and interact with each other and know their lines and all of that, there would be no play. Okay? Whereas with fiction, you can just read it and you have a story. Okay? Drama, you have to, it's active. Just like our lives are active. You have no life if you don't get out and interact with other people. There is no drama if you don't act it out. All right, and the third way that drama has a representational quality of life is that it's immediate. You watch a play in real time, just like life happens in real time. You can't fast forward or rewind life. And when you're watching a play, you can't fast forward it or rewind it either. You're in the moment. And it's kind of a metaphor for how you live. You live in the moment. Okay. You can't rewind time and go back and see the beginning of the play. Okay. You have to take it through its whole course or you're going to miss out. All right. Another feature of drama is that it's interactive, meaning it takes some give and take between the audience and the actors. So one way that it's interactive is that the characters, of course, interact with each other. They relate to each other in real time. Okay. So it's interactive. The characters can't just stand off stage and come on whenever they want. They have to come on, and the lines don't make any sense if they're not spoken back and forth to people and have the right timing and all of that. So what actors do truly is an art, because they have to have appropriate facial expressions and body movement and all that based on what the other characters are saying, so they react to that. So that makes it interactive. And the other element that makes it interactive is that it's a composite. And this is discussed on 1248. I just want to find it. I'm kind of in the middle. It says drama is interactive in another way. Unlike fiction and poetry, which are largely verbal arts, so they're done through the words, drama is a composite art, one that makes use of many of the other arts. You need painting and architecture for the sets, right? You need to create costumes. The lighting, music, sound effects help build tension and show the feelings, create the mood and the atmosphere. Sometimes there's dancing that needs to take place. And, like think of a fight scene with swords and stuff. That's like a dance, and it takes a lot of choreography and a lot of practice to get that right. So it's a complex art, and your book says it involves a dynamic interplay of visual and oral elements. So it's not just words on a page, it's all these interactive, real-time arts all blending together. Okay, they all bring it to life, and it creates just this amazing experience for people in the audience because it appeals to almost all of your senses. All right. However, we don't have the fortune of, being able to watch plays being enacted. So you're going to have to read a couple plays, and if you've looked ahead, you can see that you'll be reading Othello and you'll be reading Death of a Salesman. So those are the two big plays we're going to focus on, and they are pretty big. So you need to be prepared to read the plays, and so your book talks about how do you read theatrically, because it just isn't possible to go and watch the play. So here are some tips for reading theatrically, and it starts on the bottom of 1248 and goes to the top of 1249. All right, so when you read theatrically, you use your imagination to bring the play to life in your mind. So you're using your imagination to conjure up what this all might look like and sound like. The first way to do that is to translate like all those stage directions and descriptions into visual images. Imagine what the characters look like, what they're wearing. Imagine what the set looks like. Imagine all of that. So try and picture it in your mind. Secondly, try to interpret the words. So what are they saying? How are they creating the story, the plot? How are they interacting with each other? Next, you want to pay attention and imagine how the characters' words affect other characters. So imagine what facial expressions the other characters might have. Imagine how they might feel and show how they feel when they hear another character say something to them. Is it going to make them happy? Is it going to make them sad? Is it going to make them skeptical? So how are they going to react to what they're hearing? You have to imagine that, and that takes a lot of work. Next, imagine tone and inflection. So the tone of voice, how are the characters saying the words? If you just read the words blah, 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 you don't get any of the emotion and you're missing the heart of the play. You'll want to look at the location or imagine the location of the characters and stage items. So where would they be? Would they be standing? Would they be sitting? Are they at a desk? Are they in front of a window? You know, is it run down? So you got to imagine the set and where the characters would be when they're saying their different lines. Okay. Let me scroll a little bit. Also, you want to imagine how the characters move. So how they walk, do they have a limp? Do they skip? Are they happy-go-lucky, or are they kind of slumpy and mad and heavy? So you got to think about how they would move their bodies. Think about their gestures, and that really relates more to like their hands and their head. Are they going to nod? Would they point? Would they cross their arms? Would they put their hands on their hips? Would they hug? So what kind of gestures would they display when different events are going on stage? You want to imagine their voices. How would their voices sound? Would they be high, low, fast, slow, nasally, powerful, weak? So you want to imagine, based on what you read about the character, how might their voice sound. And imagine their facial expressions. And finally, imagine all those other artistic elements, the costumes. So how might they be dressed? The scenery, the backdrops, the sound effects. And so try and create a stage in your mind the whole time you're reading. And you could go out on the internet and Google some images for the plays and see what other productions have done. We will be watching the two plays, but the one play in your book that starts on page 1250, The Rising of the Moon, you need to read that one, and your threaded discussion over that play is due Friday. So you're going to have to do some imagining, and I ask you to do that in the threaded discussion. So this one you don't have pictures, there's no movie of it that I know of. So you're going to have to do this all in your mind. You're going to have to read theatrically, and I know you all can do it.